Hope everyone's doing well, had a decent week. I think, we're gonna let people trickle in as we get started. So this week, we're talking about Bordeaux. Last week, we were in Italy. This week, we moved on to France. And so I just want to start with a little intro about kind of the basics that if you missed the first week, kind of just like a little rehashing. So we have wine, comes from grapes. Grapes have multiple parts. You have skin, you have stems, you have pulp, you have seeds. Tannin is coming from the skin, stems, and the seeds. The sweetness and the sugar, which ends up being the alcohol, is coming from the pulp. The vine that grows the grapes is growing from the ground. And so it's going to be influenced by the temperature. It's going to be influenced by the amount of rain. It's going to be influenced by a lot of physical factors that come into play. And there's a word in French that sums it. I mean, it's not really French, it's English, but when you hear it in a French accent, someone's saying it, it sounds like it's a different language because like they put so much like emphasis on it. And I guess it is a French word initially. So we're going to listen in the next slide, someone say it, and then we're going to get started and look at the agenda and see what's in store. So as I said, terroir is important. And we're going to listen to an official video with an official French lady tell us about it. What's up, guys?
Terroir is much more important than just the soil. It's the situation, it's the prevailing winds coming from the east, it's the work that we do throughout the year to till the soil, to treat the vines. All that comes in the notion of terroir. And the French believe that that is more important than the grape variety.
So as a lot of things, that sounded better in a French accent. So we are going to periodically listen to some video clips, and that was the first. This place that we're looking at right now is Chateau Petrus. It sells bottles for like $5,000 a bottle. So pretty good wine, but we are not drinking that because that is expensive. Okay, so as I said, last time we went to Italy. Some of you came, some of you did not. It's okay. We tasted a sparkling wine called Prosecco. It was pretty good. We had it with a potato chip that was fried, and it actually paired well with the fat from the potato chip. Then we went on to have a red wine from Tuscany. It was a blend of a French grape and an Italian grape. And we kind of wanted to follow that French grape back to its homeland in Bordeaux and meet its family. And so that's where we are right now. And let's continue on. So today's wines, as hopefully you go to your box and pick out, we have the red wine is a Cab from Lodi in California. And then the other wine is a Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. And you should have them in your boxes. So you're looking for one kind of see-through bottle and one dark bottle, a skinny dark bottle. And if you don't have this exact Via Maria, New Zealand, you have a different New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, a substitution we had to make because we had some groups add at the end and it was just, things went out of stock. So you might be drinking something slightly different, but I promise it will be similar enough. Okay. So now that was a little bit of an intro. Let's talk about the agenda. So today we're going to talk about grapes. We are going to put the wine in the freezer. Then we're going to talk more about where the wine is coming from, so the regions. Then we're going to put the red in the fridge. Then we're going to talk about a couple of New World regions. So remember, in wine, we're still in 1491. Before Columbus had sailed, there's the Old World and New World for some reason. And the Old World is Europe, and the New World is the rest of the globe. And so we are using those words, even though we know they're really outdated, just because they actually describe wine pretty well and kind of wine patterns we see. So these are both New World wines that we're drinking today, but we're going to be talking about the Old World counterparts first. So that aside, then we're going to start the actual tasting. Finally, we're finally going to drink. And so that's going to happen once my alarm goes off. And so I should find my phone so I can set an alarm. Yes. That would be nice. Ah, there it is. Okay. Any questions before we get started? Any new groups have any questions? Okay, took that as a no. Okay. So we're starting now with the grapes. And so in wine, we like complicating things for no reason. And so you're going to hear the word varietal, and that literally just means the kind of grape. So it's all the same species, Venus vinifera, but these subspecies are going to differ slightly. And that's what we're going to geek out about. So looking at the pedigree, the cladogram, we're getting real nerdy about it. So we have on the bottom left, we have Merlot. So that's the one we met last week and who we really were trying to follow. That person's half brother is Cabernet Sauvignon. They're related through their mom, Cab Franc, or dad in this. So their dad is Cab Franc, very important. Dad is Cab Franc. And then Cab Sauv is kind of like who we are. Merlot is the half brother. Now, there are other people involved. So like Cabernet Sauvignon, this guy, his mom is this white wine. And so mom and dad met and they were bred over hundreds of years and they made this one. And then this one, if you go back to grandma's, line in the genetics, Sauvignon just means wild. So Cabernet Sauvignon is like Cabernet of a wild grape. Sauvignon Blanc is a white grape of a wild mother. So grandma is wild. And then we're also going to meet briefly Chenin Blanc, which is going to be the aunt of Cabernet Sauvignon. So a little, it gets confusing, but I think this is kind of like the simplest way to make it a little normal, even though it is kind of a weird concept. So let's talk about grapes. So the first grape, Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc, I'm jumping the gun. It's a white wine. So it's a white grape. White wine doesn't have to be made from white grapes, but it often is. And so it's going to have some primary flavors, but the primary thing I want us to focus on is at the second to bottom line, we see high acidity. The acidity of Sauvignon Blanc is going to be noticeable. It's like squeezing a lemon and putting it in wine. It really is going to stand out. And some of you who have more sensitive palates are not going to like it. I know my ex-girlfriend didn't like Sauvignon Blanc because it was so high acid and it seems so acerbic on the palate. So it's not for everyone, but I think that, with time and with a good pairing, it really can stand for itself. Now we're going to listen to someone else talk about Cabernet, and this guy's going to have a UK accent.
A sizable amount. Variety is very much loved around the world because it has these really deep characteristics, lots of dark black currant, cassis, black cherry notes, which are quite wonderful, and they stay quite fresh for quite some time. It's also quite, can be oaky, of course, with cigar, tobacco, and cedar, and often has a little green touch. Something like mint or green pepper may be found within it, and all the variants of those. So it is a grape that has a lot of capability, a lot of character, and can have a lot of ability to age. And that's why it is quite a famous varietal, making famous Bordeaux.
And so, as he said, the primary fruits are black currant and cassis. And for those who don't know, we mentioned it last week. It's kind of like the French version of a blackberry. They don't really grow here that well, so most of us have not heard of it. But if you go to Whole Foods at the right time of year, they will have some if you're willing to shell out some cash. And I recommend just kind of broadening your palate in the produce aisle, smelling things, taking the time out. But it's a good fruit, and it's going to be the predominant note in the Cabernet, most likely. We'll see though, because the tasting hasn't happened yet.
A sizable.
Now,
Merlot, for example, brings fruitiness, the floral side, the violet, the rose petal. So both seems to be logically a good complement, a good balance. And Cabernet Franc brings more or less between both. It is spicy, but at the same time, it brings acidity, so it is fresh and brings aging capacity too.
The winemaker can actually adjust the quantities of these different grapes in different years. So if one year the Merlot doesn't ripen as well as the Cabernet Sauvignon, he'll put more Cabernet Sauvignon in. So it's really a winemaker's wine.
What I want is vintage after vintage to bring to the consumer the best expression, the most beautiful wine.
So as you can tell, everything sounds better in a French accent, but you're stuck with me. And so as they said, the grapes in the Bordeaux blend for the red and the white are going to really be complementing each other. So it's as if, in a relationship, you kind of want someone who kind of like their flaws are kind of your weaknesses. So no, their strengths are your weaknesses and vice versa. Just so you can kind of harmoniously kind of like go through the world. So it's the same thing with wine grapes. You really want like a good pairing partner. So like Cab, this Cab, it's labeled Cab. So in America, that means it has to be 85% Cab. We're going to learn that in the New World, they label things by the grape varietal. So this is 85% Cab, or else it would be illegal. So 85%. That 15 other percent though, you're going to have some of its, marriage partners. So you're going to have some Merlot to soften it up. You're going to have some Cabernet Franc, which is not Cabernet Sauvignon. Franc is, one of the mothers, if going back to that family tree, just a different relative. But you're going to have some softening partners that we're going to see make a difference. And so, as you can tell, in the red Bordeaux blend, it's primarily Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. And in the white Bordeaux blend, it's primarily Sauvignon Blanc and another grape called Semillon, which we will touch on briefly, but it's actually not going to be blended in this New Zealand wine. So we're not going to mention it too much, except for when I geek out about like dessert wine, and then like it's really important. So just wait. Okay, so wine finally goes in the freezer. So take your dessert wine, walk over to your freezer, or whoever's freezer this is. It is in, and now the timer begins. And so now, like, I can't talk for as long as I'd like to, and I would go on and on. So I'm now have a deadline. Okay, timer is on. I have 24 minutes before I have to shut the fuck up. Okay, so we're talking about regions now. So we are going to read this quote from this guy named Hemingway. I presume most people have read it. Okay, now first place, probably some people didn't, I'm sorry. Okay, first place is Bordeaux. That's kind of the main topic and the main thing I'm trying to get you to take away from this, quote unquote lesson. But like I'm going to mention a couple other regions because we're going to see that there are other relevant regions kind of that gave birth to Bordeaux in a sense. And so we're going to touch on those, but Bordeaux is the primary topic. So please, one thing to take away, Bordeaux makes red wines from Cab and Merlot. And it's just a lot of elaboration onto that. Let's listen to her.
Must know if you're interested in wine, because so much of the wines that we drink today are influenced by this French wine region. In fact, some of the most collectible and expensive wines in the world come from this region. But what makes Bordeaux great goes well beyond these exclusive bottlings, and I'd like to show you 4 wine styles you must know from Bordeaux. So I want to give you a little bit of a quick and dirty history on Bordeaux to give you a little bit more context of what's going on here. So Bordeaux, it's located on the western side of France, along the water. There's a major river there called the Garonne, which makes Bordeaux a shipping port. Vineyards were first established here during the Roman times, and it was when the Dutch controlled the region in the 1600s that they drained all the marshlands and made them more suitable to plant vineyards. This is when these amazing chateaus started popping up and filling the region with vineyards, and they would make the wines and sell them in the city of Bordeaux to merchants called negociants who would ship the wines internationally. What's crazy about this region is that the grape variety Cabernet Sauvignon, which is the most planted popular grape variety in the world, first appeared in Bordeaux. By the 1800s, Bordeaux was well established as a wine-producing region, making red wines and sweet wines. And if you knew a thing or two about how to buy Bordeaux, you would look at the areas within Bordeaux for quality. These areas, now called appellations, are where we find quality still today. Another thing that happened during this time period, in 1855, Napoleon ordered wineries be classified based on their quality level. That classification system still stands today, and the 5 top wineries in that classification are essentially the 5 most expensive wines in Bordeaux. Of course, Bordeaux is a massive region. It's like 6 times the size of Napa Valley, so you're gonna find a lot more wine and a great affordable wine here too. So I have 4 styles of wine that sort of communicate the wealth and the breadth of wine that is made here, and it's what you should look for if you're looking to taste Bordeaux on your own. Let's dive in.
So we're going to listen to her advice and we're going to dive in.
Must.
So the last thing she mentioned was a sweet wine. So that's a dessert wine. And that's actually, it's a little interesting because the way it becomes dessert wine is that it's actually a fungus that attacks the grapes. And it's due to the kind of the clouds that form in the special river. So it can only be made there. And so you have this fungus called botrytis or noble rot that forms on this fungus and dehydrates it, turning it almost into a raisin. But a little more complex than just a raisin. And then they make the wine out of that. And it's pretty exciting. Hi, Mary. Okay, so this is where we are. This is the country of France. Bordeaux, as you heard, is on the left side. It is a shipping port, and that's where we're gonna start. And then we're gonna make our way up to north there, to the Loire Valley. And we're gonna mention some of Bordeaux's relatives in the Loire, and then we're gonna stop, and then we're gonna drink. Okay, as we said, Cab, Merlot, and Sauv Blanc. So these wines, like last week for the red, they're gonna be pretty tannic. So they need time to mature. You know, last week, for those who haven't done last week's yet, it was kind of, for most people, I'm assuming, it was pretty awful. Like the wine, the red wine was hard to drink. It was pretty undrinkable for majority of people, I assume. And so one way to kind of get around that is you could open the wine a little early. So we said it needs time to oxidize, to get older, to mature. And so like the, 18-year-old person who's like has not matured yet, it's just they're hard to be around. And so they need more time. And so one way we do that is we decant. So we oxidize the wine quickly if we don't have years and years to wait. Or you could actually open it up a day early and do that. So I do recommend that for the wine from last week. Like this week, we're going to do it straight up, and we're going to see how it tastes. And maybe tomorrow, if you have time or there's a little extra left, you can try a glass and see if it's worse or better than it was today. So back to Bordeaux. Let's talk about the climate. It's interesting. So there, every year is very different. So it's mild and humid on average. But like, Buffalo, some years it gets more snow than others. Some years in Bordeaux are better than others. And so in wine, we call it the vintage. And so some regions, the vintage matters more, and Bordeaux is one of them because of that variable climate. Some of the terms for Bordeaux is the appellation. So appel, like the name, it's kind of where it's coming from. So in France, this is very important. It's governed by all these laws because the French are very gung-ho about, their wine. And so you have other classifications too. So chateau just means house. In some places, it's like a little barn. In other places, like in Bordeaux, like they are fucking chateau. Like these are some huge places that are like multi-million-dollar mansions. And it's pretty bougie. And so a lot of times you're going to see it on the label, like a picture of like this big mansion. And usually that mansion actually exists. It's not just labeled. Then we have, Cru. In week 4, we're going to go to Burgundy, a little bit Eastern France. And we're going to see that that's a very important term there. Because there you actually have all these monks, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, that kind of created these walls, I guess. If you're a monk, you don't really have much to do besides like building things and kind of like gardening. And so they build all these walls around their little vineyards, and they noticed that each kind of vine produced a different wine. Like it was just slightly different. And so there, things matter even more. They're even more precise. And so we're going to see that they care even more about small areas. But for this week, it's a little more lax and kind of, it's more like think about things by the acre as opposed to by the, the millimeter. And so going to the left bank as was mentioned earlier. We have Saint Estèphe, Pauillac, Saint Julien, and Margaux. So these are all going to be Cabernet dominant, and they are going to be interesting. And I'm going to have someone else tell you about it, just because I think it might be interesting. Never mind.
River, there are a few important places to look at on the left bank. Grave, which I mentioned before, and it's a very nice section called Pessac-Léognan. Then there's Margaux, which is known for wines of great finesse. After that, we have Saint Julien, and Saint Julien is known for having a high concentration of very good second growth and third growth wines. After that, we get to Pauillac, and Pauillac is definitely the king, having the highest number of first growth chateaus. Pauillac wines are usually the more expensive ones, usually the more muscular, the more powerful style with a high percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon. Beyond that, we get to Saint Estèphe, and Saint Estèphe is usually known for wines of very good quality, but also a little bit of rusticity, slightly rough around the edges.
I enjoy both left and right things. What's the difference between the left and the right banks?
So now let's look at the right bank. There are two villages that are most important on the right bank, Saint-Emilion and Pomerol. Saint-Emilion has a ranking system of its own. It's a little complex, but for the most part, there are some Grand Cru wines, and then there are some ranked wines that are also called Grand Cru Classé. In Pomerol, there is no ranking system, but it's relatively small and there aren't that many producers, and for the most part, it's very high quality. Saint-Emilion and Pomerol are both known for wines driven by Merlot.
Okay, so a little fun video for you, and they're fans of New York. I wonder what they think of New York wine. But so a couple interesting things there. They said the word finesse. So in wine, like in many things, you can have finesse. So it's kind of like it's a very like bougie word because there's no like precise definition, but basically it does a good job. It's like a ballerina, but also like big person. So it has a presence, but it's also very precise. And so that word gets thrown around a lot. And so hope next week I'll have a definition for you. Not a precise one right now. Another thing that he said was that the left bank, there was, each place has a different feel. He said, masculine. He said that it was, rough around the edges. He said these words, and then the other place was softer. And so going back to kind of what we said last week about using kind of feminine and masculine, though it seems a little weird, we kind of use that to describe wine for whatever reason. And so you're going to hear that.
However, there are a few important.
Okay. So as he said, if you forgot where we were, we're in Bordeaux. So the rivers, not going to be on the test, I promise. What will be on the test is that in 100 years ago, they used to call this in the UK. They used to export it all to the UK, right? Because they were in France, but they tried to invade France like hundreds of years before. So like they wanted French wine for whatever reason, and so they cared, and so they would buy it, but they would call it claret. So you might hear the word claret thrown around, and that just means a Bordeaux red. So as we said, grape varietals don't really matter so much because it can be Cab, it can be Cabernet Franc, or it could be Merlot. It can be any of those, but what matters is where it's from, and how it tastes, how it all balances together. One kind of little mnemonic. So the left bank, there's a huge place called Graves. Graves, literally, the dirt there is gravel. Gravel. You might see the connection. And so the wine there, it's actually really cool. So I don't want to get too into it, but basically the sun, it heats up the gravel during the day like it would for a concrete road. Like during the day, it absorbs all this heat. And then at night, when the rest of the region is very cold, these rocks re-emit all of the heat. And so it's actually like it keeps the grapes warm at night, which is important, if you're a little chilly at night. And so it actually helps the grapes, and it's a little fun fact for you. As I said, Sauterne is like the shit with dessert wine. So some of you like Moscato, not most reputable dessert wine. Sauterne, on the other hand, is like world renowned. If you can afford to buy a half bottle like this, I highly recommend. This is Chateau de Cam, which, you know, it goes for like $3.50 a bottle, so it's not terrible. But I mean, the reason is they have to hand pick each and every grape that's perfectly affected by this fungus, and so they pick at the perfect time, one by one, and it's just like painstaking, and so, you know, they got to be compensated. And here are some prices. So, you know, as we said, you know, a lot of these left bank stuff, you know, $1,000, Lafite Rothschild, very well known, and then Decam, Sauterne, as we said, like 500, and then Chateau Petrus, and which is interesting is that that's actually 100% Merlot. So Merlot gets a bad rep, but little do people know that one of the most expensive wines in the world is actually 100% Merlot. So next time you shit on Merlot, think twice. And so let's talk about the wines that we're actually going to drink, because, like, honestly, we're probably not drinking Chateau de Cam, you know, after a Fondo exam. We're probably drinking what this guy is going to tell us.
The main difference between Bordeaux and Bordeaux Superior is more consistency of quality.
The three principal differences are that the Superior has to have half a degree potential alcohol more, it has to have a slightly lower yield, and it has to be aged for slightly longer in barrel, therefore intimating that it is a slightly more structured wine.
We're not so fond of grapes, and we think that the terroir is much more important than the grapes. To give you an example and to be more precise, we think that the Cabernet produced in Medoc would be very different from the Cabernet in California. Just nothing like. Chateau Duc L'Expérience de Miller.
One of the finest qualities of Bordeaux lies in the balance.
It cannot be too much something. It cannot be too much alcohol, too much tannin, too much acidity. The art of Bordeaux, the mystery of Bordeaux is to be a good balance. And this balance must be in harmony with the food.
So notice, they did shit on California. That is a common theme. So a lot of French people think that France is the center of the wine world, because arguably it is. And so anything that's not French needs to kind of try to become Francofied, you know, or kind of more French-like. And so there was a lot of competition that, you know, whether or not Napa Valley and, you know, Bordeaux, which made the better red wine. And, you know, in 1976, there was a tasting in Paris called the Tasting of Paris. Makes sense. And in it, they said that the American wine, when this is the blind, so they're not looking at the name of the bottle when they drink it, they actually voted it higher than the French wine. And, you know, of course the French were pissed, because, you know, they had just voted the American wine as good, if not better, than French wine. And so you know, what that guy was saying is a remnant of this Frank superiority complex, which is, you know, pretty apparent with anyone. And I'm pretty pro-French, so that might come out.
Bordeaux is the spot where you find Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. Now, depending on which side of the river you're on, you might see a little bit more Cabernet Sauvignon on one side and a little bit more Merlot on the other. But what really the focus is in Bordeaux, and I really think this is the focus in France in general, is this idea that we're taking what's around us and we're figuring out how to blend it together. The French are master blenders. If you're looking for Cabernet-based wines for Bordeaux, definitely look in the Medoc region and those sub-regions within the Medoc or Graves. And if you're looking for great Merlot-focused ones, these are delicious wines. Pomerol or Saint-Emilion are a great place to get.
So right bank, Merlot. Merlot has an R in it. And so Merlot is from the right bank. If you take nothing away from this class, which most, I mean, I'm probably not either. So like right bank, Merlot. Cool. We might not have time for this.
Hi, for this section of wines in these areas, but Medoc, and it's usually the better quality area.
Yeah, let's skip him. All right, so there's not much time. I think we should put the red wine in the fridge now, even though it doesn't tell us to. So you guys are ready. Ooh, red wine goes in the fridge. All right, so now.
We would just like it to be known that we are pro-California in this house.
All right, I'm very pro California too. My dad only collected California wine, and so like I own we own like thousands of bottles of California wine. So like I'm very pro California. It just I have to tell you about the France because like this is a wine class and like you have to talk about France. All right, so the Loire. We have going to that first generation. We see Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, Cab Franc. Those were like the ones who gave birth to Cab Sauv. And so those are the ones that really predominate and do really well here. So we have kind of three regions I want you to notice. So we have Vouvray, Chinon, and Sancerre. Now, a little mnemonic for you. So Sancerre is going to make Sauvignon Blanc, so S with S. What's not on the list is Chardonnay, because that's actually going to be week 4. But so Sauvignon Blanc, Sancerre, Sancerre, Sauvignon Blanc. Cab Franc is coming from Chinon, which is actually a pretty good value. You can get one for like, high $20, and it'll do nicely with a lot of foods. And then Chenin Blanc, also known as Vouvray, because they name it after the place and not the grape, because you have to just know what the grape is, because they expect you to. And so that's going to be a Chenin Blanc, which is going to be very similar to the wine we have, but it's a little less acidic, a little less gooseberry, a little less, stone fruit. And it's going to be a little bit more on the yellow side of things. So like think yellow, delicious apple, think yellow pear. I don't even know if pears are yellow, but think like pear. So think of like yellow-y fruits. California. So in honor of the California request, we have to talk about California just because it produces 90% of this country's wine. And so even though the slide says I will mention Washington, like now I'm not going to because Emily doesn't want me to. So Cab from California is king. And the reason it's king is that cash is king. California is the most, Cabernet Sauvignon is the most lucrative crop. In business school, we consulted with a Napa Valley producer named Chapelet, and they only grow Cab really just because it is the most lucrative. You get the most money as quickly as possible. And so Cabernet also, luckily, it does really well in the current climate of Napa. Napa's a little warm though. And so with climate change in about 20, 30 years, it probably won't be producing the best Cab. And it's actually unfortunate because this is the case for a lot of the wine world. So Bordeaux, there have been great Cabs grown in Bordeaux for hundreds of years. In about 40, 50 years, it's not going to be good for Cab anymore. And so kind of this, it's going to say, well, we drink with our grandkids. We're actually going to be we're going to be drinking slightly differently. And so I just wanted to keep that in mind as, we continue to drive our cars and our heated kitchens and whatnot. Yeah. All right. So that was California with a green kind of filibuster inserted, which I think California would have liked. And now we're going to go to Australia. We've already put it in the fridge, so don't worry. We won't get too much of the Aussies. So it's a continent. For Cab, a good place, C for C, Cab, Coonawarra makes good Cab. Not that hard to remember. Other wine from the country, Shiraz, is their other kind of go-to Australian wine. You might like it, you might not. We're not drinking it, so I'm not going to worry. This is another map. Now New Zealand, this is where we're actually drinking from, so why don't we talk about it? This is what it looks like. There's a North Island and a South Island. If you visit, you're most likely to go to the South Island because that's where, actually no, that's wrong. I went to Auckland. So you're most likely to go to the North Island or you can go to Christchurch. All right, forget what I said. You can go anywhere. It's a big place. I'm sure travel's easy. Go wherever you want, okay? Wine-wise, their Sauv Blanc is going to be coming from, our Sauv Blanc is coming from Marlborough, which, as you may guess, the soil is called marl, M-A-R-L, and borough, because that's like a UK thing. They just put borough on things. Edinburgh, they just do that. So it's where the soil is marly, and that's going to be good for Sauvignon Blanc. There's a little picture of what it looks like. They have a really good reputation for Sauvignon Blanc. They what they can do that California can't is they can make a Sauvignon Blanc that's really good. California can do that too, but they can make one for like $10, $15, which the reason people in the New World, when I was at business school, we were consulting for that Napa winery, they didn't want to make Sauvignon Blanc because when they make it, the prices are a lot higher. It costs them a lot more. And so one of the beauties of New Zealand is you're going to get really good value for your Sauvignon Blanc, which as medical students with limited budgets, it's appealing. Now, quickly, a little Chile action. So Santiago, you fly into Santiago, you are already in great wine country. You have the San Antonio Valley right there. You have Casablanca. You have the Maipo Valley. I think I mispronounced that because there's like an accent on the I usually. But a lot of great wine places. And it's actually a lot of cab in America is coming from Chile. They also, some of it is pretty shitty, but some of it is drinkable. And so you might find good values. So keep your eyes peeled. Now, because I flew at the end, we actually have an extra minute for questions or maybe the video. Anyone want to say anything before we take things out? Any pro-California comments?
Do people ever just like make new wine? Like instead of trying to replicate like Sauvignon Blanc or like whatever, be like, okay, this is a different region that grows a different kind of grape. Why don't they just like make something new?
That's a great question. So great question. Why don't people try new things in wine? So they're not going to try new things in France because like they love tradition there. But you're right. In New Zealand, in California, why the hell are we growing French stuff? Well, the reason is, unfortunately, that when you try things that kind of haven't been proven, like this is me when I was like, I don't want to make a comparison to me cooking as like a 12-year-old, but like I would like take like cold cuts and like put them in like a soup and like I would do crazy, like no, like there are reasons people don't do that. And so we're trying to learn from tradition without like adhering to it completely. And so you're right that in the New World, especially, there is kind of some laxity. And so we are kind of late. We're not blending grapes all the time. We're kind of letting the Cabernet Sauvignon speak for itself, by being 90% that. But we're not kind of, breeding new grapes. I mean, it's been done, but there haven't been any really, really great new grapes that have been made, like Cornell Ag. They actually produce a lot of new varietals for wine, but none of them have really, jumped off, as great wines. Unfortunately, but I mean, time will tell. Maybe one, resistant to climate change is actually going to be, the future of wine. So they're doing a lot of experiments, and I think you're right. There is room for kind of a break with tradition. So let's take our wine out. And I love the question, but it's time to drink. So take out the white and the red. And as we take them out, I want us actually to notice one thing, because we mentioned a break with tradition. So both these bottles have screw caps. In France, that would be not allowed. That would be bad. So the reason we use screw caps is that someone the first week asked about cork taint and why more wine was not stored in a way that it's not vulnerable to being ruined. And the reason it's not, as I said, the price of a corked wine, people perceive it as higher value, and so people pay more for it. But places in the New World are more willing to, not compromise the quality of the wine and make it easier for consumers. If you don't have a corkscrew, it's kind of easy to twist off. And so we have 2 twist offs today, which I want you to know does not mean they're low value. I've seen the most expensive twist off I've seen was like, $300. So they make good wine in, twist off.
121 experiment.
So in case you think like what we're about to do is bullshit, because like if you missed last week, we use a lot of like flowery words for like things that you've tasted before. But this is kind of a little validation that it's for me. I want to see it, so we're gonna have to watch it.
121 experimentally distinguishable aromas charted on the wheel, each with its own uniquely descriptive and occasionally surprising name.
The reason that I use words like wet dog is precisely because that's what it smells like. But interestingly, if I want to generate it, and I do this every winter when I'm teaching, I take white wine out and I stick it in the sun. And if you have a Chardonnay or a Sauvignon Blanc, within minutes, it's either going to smell like a leak in the sewer gas or maybe wet dog. Ever since I was little, I've listened to my nose. Most people don't listen to their noses, but it doesn't take very long to train them to do it. So once you are listening to your nose, you're able to much more quickly smell something and come up with a label, as opposed to smelling something and saying, oh, I remember smelling that before. It's familiar.
Each of the descriptions on the aroma wheel can be described in chemical terms. Wet dog is 2-methylbutanol. The smell of green peppers, known in America as bell peppers, is 2-isobutyl 3-methoxypyrazine. A little further round the aroma wheel, and we reach black currant, which is 2,6,6-trimethyl 2-vinyl 4-acetoxytetrahydropyrene. But then you probably knew that.
So, as I was kind of hinting at, there are differences between us among olfactory receptors. So some of us are going to notice these chemicals at lower concentrations. And so some of us are going to taste things, other of us are not. And so because of that, it is somewhat subjective. It is a little bit, when do we draw that all these chemicals in trace amounts are present, but where do we say, oh, I start smelling cut hay or cut grass? When is it just like, oh, maybe that's coming from, the landscaper over there. It's hard to, you want a room that's neutral so you can really pinpoint it to the wine, but we all have different thresholds. And so there is a bit of hand waving, but it's not all hand waving, even though you might think that.
120.
Okay, let's drink. Time to twist off. And so like last week, we're going to be going off of the those papers you got in your box. We're doing it just for precision's sake and just to say we kind of went with a good structure this time. And if you bought the foods on the syllabus, which like who read the syllabus? I did. But you can break those foods out, and so we can try them with the wine. And you guys can tell me what tastes good, what doesn't taste good, and we can kind of try to reason why that may or may not pair well. Okay. So everyone has their glassware, I hope. So their generic tasting glass. Hopefully it's clean. I see mine. Oh, that I didn't plan. But so I opened it a little bit and there was enough pressure, positive pressure, to push it out. I've never seen that. So I'm actually a little skeptical of this wine right now. Just because that tells me that, I don't want to give it away, but like, that means there was something creating gas in this possibly. So like something, for instance, like a secondary fermentation, a microorganism in the bottle that, it's supposed to be alcohol is already created. So you don't want more happening. And so I'm thinking it's just kind of the they put nitrogen gas in there, an inert gas, to prevent it from spoiling. But it makes me a little skeptical because if that were CO2, it would probably show a wine fault and we would be tasting that soon. So appearance, keep your eyes peeled, friend. Okay, so we pour ourselves a little bit. The first category, it looks like, is clarity. So because I need to see, it looks clear. I don't see any imperfections in it. So I would be looking kind of like for almost like swirls, kind of like hazy material. I don't see any of that. So we're going to say it's clear. Next on the list, we have intensity. So looking at it, I would say, and kind of seeing, I'm using a white background just because otherwise the background we have changes in each room. The lighting is different and we need a way to kind of standardize it. And so we're going to be using this white backdrop. So it is definitely pale. It's pale, medium, or deep. This is without a doubt a very pale white wine. It almost looks watery. Luckily, it's not watery. If it were, we'll find out shortly. But it does appear that way. Color, as I said last week, we're going to put this on the lemon spectrum. I see maybe some green hues. So, but I would put this more on the lemon green. Actually, honestly, it might be lemon green. let's say, lemon lime. So no, it's, somewhere between lemon or yellow and green. But I mean, I would definitely call this yellow green, actually. Okay. So other observations. One thing we observed was the cork pop out due to my incompetence, but I think it may tell something about this wine. One thing that we mentioned last week is that we can try to observe these things called legs. I don't see any legs because it's too low in alcohol percentage, and there's no sugar in it, so there aren't going to be legs. Bubbles, no, but that the gas in the top of the bottle makes me think a little bubbles where CO2 was made, maybe. Now we're finally getting to the nose. Now, some of you may have tasted it already, and I don't blame you, but now it's time to smell. So as we said the first week, we do the chest, chin, nose test. So Chet, it's funny, this is very aromatic for me. I am already smelling from the chest. I have a terrible sense of smell. I am very surprised. You might, if you're not smelling it, you could cheat and try to swirl a little bit, but I am smelling this already. Now the chin, you should be wafting in something, a little bit. It should be wine-like or fruit-like. It definitely should smell. If you're not smelling it, you might have COVID. This is definitely a very aromatic grape. Now, when you put your nose in, put the schnog in, you should really smell stuff. And we're going to get to it. So it's a clean nose. I don't smell any imperfections. It's not flawed like I thought it might be. It's not. The intensity of the nose, as I said, it's very intense. So on this sheet, I would put it at pronounced. It's not medium plus. It is above medium plus. It is a pronounced intensity. Now we're flipping the sheet over, and we're going to be talking about the aromas. This is when people think we're making shit up. So this is the chemicals we smell, and we're going to be giving them labels. And so on the sheet, on the back, the first row says floral. Now let's keep that in mind, and let's try to give it a smell. The predominant note is not floral. I would say it's more fruit on the notes, but I think I am getting blossoms. I'm getting linden. Most people have never heard of it because why the hell would anyone know it? But linden, it's a flower. I think it actually, if you go it's like chamomile. Like if you go in the tea aisle, I think you can actually get tea. I don't know. I think it's probably placebo. I don't know if it actually does anything for your sore throat, but they do, I think, sell it in the tea aisle, if I'm not wrong. So I'm getting linden on the nose for blossom. It's not on the list though. So there are some flowers not on this list. I apologize. I thought it was a thorough list. But the linden is pretty similar to chamomile. So if you've smelled chamomile before, you kind of can smell what I'm getting at. And so how we learned earlier that they're all chemicals. Well, a lot of these chemical compounds are in the same family and very related. And so the way they hit our receptors, it's a very similar combination. And so one man's, red apple is another man's, red delicious, or another man's Macintosh. It's very similar. And so it's not totally precise. So we'll give it chamomile. So other primary aromas, so let's go to the fruit. Now, New Zealand is known for very fruity Sauvignon Blanc. In fact, the whole New World is known for the fruit-forward character. So we said Old World versus New World. Old World, Europe, France in particular, is known for the non-fruit. So the savoriness, the complexity, the gravel, gravel. And so we're not going to be getting that as much, especially here, because this is not grown in gravel. It's grown on marl, which is a clay soil. But fruit-wise, some of you may, say grape. And honestly, I kind of do smell green fruit. So I get some green grape. I know we think that, all wines are grapes, but this is more grapey than usual. In terms of citrus, may need a little. Citrus wise, and remember, as I said, if you want to seem really intense, close your eyes as you smell, really focus. Makes you look like a hardo, but it helps. Okay. I'm definitely getting some grapefruit, and I would say lemon peel. Now you may be saying I smell lemon juice or I smell zest. You know, tomato. It really, we can all agree that there's some lemon notes in this wine. There's some. I mean, if you think I'm BSing about the linden, which honestly I might be, the citrus fruit. You smell citrus fruit. This smells like the orange area of the produce aisle. It just does. Tropical fruits, I'm not getting much. Red fruit, black fruit, no. Dried cooked fruit. I'm not. This seems light. It seems, it doesn't seem overwhelmingly cooked or heavy. So I know I'm not getting that. In terms of herbaceous notes, that I would say yes. I mean, one thing that you guys are going to learn from this session is that the key word with Sauvignon Blanc is, especially from New Zealand, cut grass. It's a pyrazine molecule. Freshly mowed grass has this smell, and like I totally get it from this glass. Or I just totally know that I'm supposed to get it, but like I do. With that in mind, think cut grass, and then smell this wine, and you should see what I'm talking about. A little bit. I mean, it's definitely present. If you don't smell it, you're just wrong. No, but we're developing our palates. You probably don't smell it. It just takes time, but you might get notes of it. And then the other Sauvignon Blanc note, which I'm getting a little bit, not too heavily though. It's going to sound a little gross, but it's cat pee. So, cat litter. I don't know who has cats. I don't have cats, but like there's a distinct smell to it. And in Sauvignon Blanc, some people are very sensitive to that smell and they get it strong. This one, it's actually below my threshold. And so I'm not getting cat pee, but maybe as it warms up and things start volatilizing more, I might start getting that cat pee note. And it's not gross. It's not a flaw. It's just Sauvignon Blanc. It's the grape. Some of us smell, some of us don't. It's just the smell the grape gives. Okay. So going back, let's go to secondary stuff. Secondary stuff. So this is stuff coming from the winemaking process. Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand is made in stainless steel vats. And so it's actually not imparting any flavors. And so we're not going to get any of these secondary aromas. I don't get any butter, any vanilla. It sees no wood, no oak age. And so we're not getting any of that. In terms of tertiary stuff, again, this is a very young wine. It's from 2020. And that vintage is so recent that we're not actually getting any age and bottle age notes to come through. And so we're not getting any of those notes. Development. So we're still smelling, I guess. Sorry. So as I said, there's a front palate, a mid palate, and a back palate. I would say the front palate is predominantly, maybe floral mixed with fruit. The mid palate is, so the mid nose is definitely fruit. But now, because most people have already done it already, why don't we taste it? So hopefully people like this one. This is a very likable wine. If we had kind of some cheese or some soft, something, I don't know, something with a little bit of fat, but not too heavy, it would go very nicely with this. This is, I would drink this on a porch in summer. I mean, this can really go with anything. But sweetness wise, if you pinch your nose and taste it, you're not going to taste any sugar. You smell fruit, which some people in our brains, we automatically associate that with sweetness, because in normal life, it is associated with sweetness. But when you pinch your nose and taste it, you're actually not going to get any sweetness. Acidity, as I mentioned earlier. I'm definitely getting acidity on the palate. So I feel it on the sides of the tongue. It's like a sharpness. So I would definitely put this at medium high to high acidity. Now, in terms of tannin, there is none. Alcohol, I don't get it. It doesn't attack the nose, which would be actually VAC, so it would be volatile alcohol compounds. And that's a wine flaw, which you should give it back to the waiter if you get it. But I don't get that here. On the palate, I'm getting medium low alcohol. It's not high alcohol. If I look at the bottle, which is cheating, it says 13.5. It tastes, I would say 12.5 or 13. It doesn't taste 13.5 percentage, but so be it. They're actually allowed plus or minus 1% in it. So you can taste one that, it says it's going to be 14. It could be 13. It could be 15. So just keep that in mind. So you get too messed up, So the body is light. As we said, think of, a ballerina, think of, very light, spring day. It's not heavy. So bubbles, no bubbles. Intensity. So it smelled, going back, it smelled very intense. On the palate, so this is on the taste. It's intense, but it's not as intense as as the nose would make me think. I would put it at flavor intensity. I would put it at medium plus. I wouldn't put it at pronounced like we did for the nose intensity. And so palate characteristics, these are going to be very similar to what we noticed on the smell. I would say maybe one addition would be maybe fennel. Or so herbal, so primary characters, herbal. I get a little fennel. Not a lot though. And we're not really supposed to. But no, if not fennel, like a tarragon, like something of that family of compounds. So maybe I put it, it's not on the list, but tarragon, maybe. No secondary, no tertiary. Finish. So this is a wine I just swallowed or spit, whichever you're doing. And so do you still taste it seconds later? That's what we call the finish or the aftertaste. We use the word finish because we try to be pretentious, but that's the finish. And so how long does it last? I would say that this wine, as I ramble, I still taste it. And so I would actually put that finish, I think partly due to the acidity, the high acidity, I put that finish around 8 seconds. And so I would put that actually at medium plus, if not, medium plus. And then in terms of conclusions, the quality level, I would say is very good. I would say quality level, it's not, going to knock your socks off. If you're wearing socks, not everyone's wearing socks, but it's not going to, blow you away, but it is going to stand up to anything you pair with it. So if you're eating white fish, this wine is going to pair beautifully. And this wine, it has all the characteristics you expect from a Sauvignon Blanc. This wine is only, $17. Normally a Sauvignon Blanc, especially if we were to get one from Bordeaux for $17, it would be, awful. It would not be drinkable. This is very true to the varietal for a decent price. And so that would be one of our conclusions. And it's definitely ready now. If we waited another year, it probably would last, but it would start to fade. Sauvignon Blanc, because it doesn't have any tannin, it doesn't have any backbone. Really, it has acidity, which helps, but there's no, especially from the New World, there's nothing to gain really from waiting. And so this would be a wine we drink now as one of the conclusions. And let's see how we did. Okay. Youthful, we kind of said it was young. Because of the year though, not really. Cool climate. Aromas jump out of the glass. We noticed that. Lemongrass. Okay, so they combined grass and lemon with lemongrass. It's a medicinal herb. You may know it. They make tea out of it. Jalapeno peppers. Interesting. So that's saying one of the compounds in the whole family of Cabernet grapes. So Sauvignon is the birth, remember, the mother. So you have this pyrazine molecule. And so it usually takes the form of bell pepper. They're calling it jalapeno pepper here, which is interesting because I didn't get too much of it, but they wanted you to notice it, presumably. And so, as it says, a great aperitif wine. So a wine without food, a wine you drink, before going to dinner. This is a wine that will stimulate the appetite. You can have it with a snack. You can have it with cheese. You can have it with fish if you wanted to, but it really can stand on its own. It's not like that Tannic Red from last week that it was just too much by itself. This wine by itself does wonders. Okay, pairing principle number 3. We had 2 last week. We're going to add 1 this week. So this wine saw no oak, and so we can serve this with anything that you could squeeze a lemon on. So I include nothing in that. So this wine you can drink with nothing. But in terms of seafood, this wine is perfect. I mean, you can't do better than a Sauvignon Blanc with oyster. I mean, with oysters, you can do a little better. You can do champagne or something a little better. But with shrimp, with halibut, with salmon, you could do better. Just you don't need something so light. But with a lot of whitefish, you really tilapia even. I don't know who likes tilapia, but some people do, and you could drink this with tilapia. Okay, now you can put the white away, or you can finish it. I mean, presumably over the course of the next 20 minutes, you'll finish both bottles. I mean, you're not forced to. I mean, please don't if you don't want to. But you can put the white away, and we're going to move on to the red. So, red time. And feel free to, if anyone has any questions, now's a good time.
Yes, we appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Cheers. And so wait, that reminds me. It doesn't really remind me, but so one thing we do if we're using the same glass between different wines is we do this thing I said like last time, we kind of marry the 2 wines. So we're not blending them, but we kind of are. So there was remnants of the white wine still in my glass. I just poured a little bit of the red wine in the glass to kind of get rid of it. So now I have a solution of both of them. Then I'm going to pour that out. And then I'm going to add the red, and now it's good to go. You don't have to do it, especially if the wine is precious, or you want to get as much alcohol as possible in your body. But it is something I'm going to do, and you may choose to do. Just because if you add water to the glass to wash it out, it'll dilute the wine, and who wants diluted wine?
Wait, we have a question.
Yes, hit me.
When you're talking about finish, do you want a long finish or you don't? Or like what's desirable, or it's just like a characteristic of it and it doesn't really matter?
So great question. So finish is desirable. It's like I can see what you're saying in that some context, like if I'm eating something and I don't want the wine to overpower the food, I wouldn't want a really long finish. And so one of the reasons we drink like really good wine with kind of like good food, but not like the most complex, interesting food, is that we want the wine to really show off, and we want a long finish. If we were going to a special chef's restaurant who's known for like this bizarre cuisine, and we really wanted to enjoy it, we would probably go for kind of a blander wine, just because we don't want to finish, we don't want something that kind of doesn't let the food do the main thing. And so we choose the wine with that said, higher quality wine is traditionally associated with longer finish. And so winemakers are trying to make it as long as possible. A good question. Okay. So new wine, it's a red on my page. And it's from California as requested from Emily. So I'm actually not allowed to smell it yet. Appearance is clear. I don't see any schmutz in my wine, which is good. The intensity, it's pretty inky. I see it, I'm not talking about color. It's like, it's a purplish ruby, but in terms of intensity, I put my fingers underneath. I can't see them. I'm okay with not seeing my fingers, but I'm just saying that, it's pretty dark, pretty deep colored. And so I would definitely put this in, into the medium deep. I'd probably put this as deep, which makes sense when I think about it, because Cabernet Sauvignon has a thick skin, and thicker skin. Think about all the red part of the grape is the skin. And so thicker skin is going to mean a deeper colored wine. And we see that here. Wait. Yes. And so, as I said, ruby color. And now the fun part. Oh. Yeah. So we had a video in here talking about polyphenols. I took it out because we showed it last week. But basically, they're the compounds in the grapes that, one of the reasons they're healthy, red wine is good for our health. The reason is the polyphenols, but it's also kind of what gives it color. That's the wrong wine. Okay. So the nose. We're going to the back of the sheet. We're looking at all those bougie characteristics. So your chest, chin, nose, if you want. So I wasn't getting it much on. I was getting nothing on the chest. So one word we could use to describe this wine is it's kind of shy. It sounds a little stupid, but it's a little reserved. It's not jumping out of the glass like the last wine is. This one, requires a little more to open up, which is nothing wrong with that. It's just a little shyer a wine. So when I put my nose in the glass, I do get something, right? It is actually wine, and you do smell it. And so in terms of intensity, which I guess I skipped, I would put it at medium. It's not the most intense smelling wine. It is clean though, so condition is clean, but intensity is medium. So going to what I was already kind of jumping at already, let's see what we can smell. Let's see if anyone identifies anything. I'd love to hear if anyone can. I don't want to. Yeah, Emily, let's hear
it. We were smelling here like definitely the black currant. We thought black cherry.
Wait, yes. Oh my God, yes. Wait, so you're totally right. So definitely, black cherry, I don't think it was on the list earlier, but black cherry, especially from a California cab, is like you definitely get a black cherry note. So you are spot on. As like a lot of our classmates would say, like, your money, or whatever that means. Your money. All right. So great. So yes, definitely some dark fruit. So black currant, as we said, black cherry or black plum, definitely. So yeah, I'm not drinking it yet, even though I keep trying to.
Wait, can I offer?
What's that?
I kind of smelled like a buttery scent when I first I know it's like secondary.
You're jumping the gun here. So we're already going down to secondary. I think you're right. So we know that you're getting a little ahead. But you're spot on. So yes, this wine sees. I made the slide, so I saw that how long it took to make the wine. It takes 8 months of aging, I think I recall, in oak, and so that oak is going to impart a flavor. It's I think it said it was new French oak. So even though we're in California, we kind of rely on these traditional methods just because it's been proven. And so one of the traditional methods is aging in oak. And so that's going to impart a vanilla, a buttery flavor. For whatever reason, we tend to use buttery more when describing white wine that sees oak. We tend to use kind of more of a vanilla or chocolate when describing red wine that sees oak. But she's definitely right in that it does see oak. And on my nose, though, is too weak. I'm not getting a ton of chocolate or vanilla on the nose yet, but some people probably are. So great.
But we think it's butterscotch from the oak options on the sheet.
No, I understand that. We're just not at that yet. Okay. No, I know. So you know how it's aromas or flavors. So and that flavor is mainly aroma. So when we drink it, we're still getting aromas. What I'm saying is that I'm not getting it without drinking it yet, just because my taste buds are too, I'm not as sensitive. Which actually they show that women are more sensitive to olfactory cues than men are. So it makes sense that I'm not getting anything yet. I apologize. Okay. I'm gonna now that everyone's so ahead of me, I want to taste it. I feel behind. Okay. But so going back, I kind of skipped a little bit. Going back to the nose development. So it says youthful to tired. So we were talking about age earlier and oxidation. So youthful is going to be, the teen. I keep saying the teenager, and I apologize if it's annoying, but it's going to be someone who's younger, as opposed to tired, past its prime. That's going to be a wine that it just seen too much time in the bottle, and so it's no longer as vivacious or as lively as it was in its youth. And so you're going to see that it's going to be a little dull, a little uninspired when you drink it. And I'm not noticing that here, but on the nose, it would be very muted. So I said earlier, reserved, quiet, shy. Muted is kind of the more common way of describing it. So, mute, not talking. Muted on the nose is just kind of you're not getting any sense.
So should we decant any of these reds at any point?
So
or no?
So great. So I was debating this just because I know most people don't have decanters. As someone with multiple decanters, I don't see why people don't have decanters, but I guess some people don't. And so I didn't want to make it an obstacle. And that a lot of these wines can be enjoyed without decanting. I agree that this wine, or the wine especially the wine from last week, would have improved with a decanting. That said, it's not required, and though it would probably increase the quality of the experience, it's not necessary. But good question.
Can we see what some of your decanters look like if they look really cool?
Yeah, I do have some great shaped.
Alert from low battery.
And so I'd love to show off my decanters one day. But right now I'm not in my place. So I apologize that I don't have a bunch of decanters to show off. But basically, they look like vases or vases. They're just different shapes. What?
Where's Nick?
So Nick is not. He's at Taekwondo. He does Taekwondo. Okay, but he's good Wi-Fi, so that's why I'm here. My Wi-Fi is a little spotty sometimes. So yeah. All right. Nose goes. So development, as I kind of mentioned, this is kind of a little subjective though, is that we use past experience to know whether or not it's going to get better or worse. And so this wine, it's so young, I know that it's probably going to get better, not worse. But it's not obvious. Each wine is different, so it's kind of a subjective call. So sweetness. I am not getting any sugar. There's no sugar. Sugar turned into alcohol. We mentioned in Bordeaux, there's a very good dessert wine. And the reason it becomes so sweet is that it's so concentrated that when the yeast die off at 14.5, percent alcohol, there's still sugar left that could have been fermented. This one, when the yeast die, all the sugar's already gone. And so there's not any residual sugar. And so makes sense we don't taste it. In terms of intensity, or no, acidity, I can't read. I would say medium. So, it's, remember, Cab is related to its sister, or no, I forget the family tree, but it's related to the Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc was so acidic, it makes sense that the Cab is pretty acidic. So I would say medium high. Tannin. It's funny, it's not as tannic as last week. So tannin it's what's coating your tongue. It's tanning leather, it's drying your tongue. And so you feel it coating around your tongue. We are getting that here. For some of you, it may be a little too much tannin. But if we were going to pair this with food, which some of you did the recommended, filet, or I forget exactly the meat I recommended. But if you do that with this, it really will. Basically you have the meat, and so you have kind of this like aftertaste of like beef in your mouth, or mushrooms. Then you drink a sip of this. The way it interacts with the proteins in your mouth, it just refreshes your palate. And so that's one of the reasons it does so beautifully with red meat in particular. So I would put it at medium high 10. Alcohol, likewise, it's not as hot. So hot, you take a shot of vodka, tastes kind of warm. This wine, normal wine is about 13.5%. This wine, it's not as hot as I thought, coming from Lodi in Napa, or in California, which is a very warm place. It's one of the warmer parts for California wine. So I thought it might be a little, so that would mean, right, sweeter grapes, higher sugar levels, which turns into higher alcohol levels on the other side after fermentation. This one, I'm actually not getting as much heat as I thought I would. I would put it at 14.5. So I would put it at average. I mean, some people might be a little sensitive, so they would say medium high alcohol. No, it would be medium alcohol. There's no medium high option. In terms of body, so remember, this is what we said. We said the difference between heavy cream and skim milk. This is how much of a presence it makes. And so we pair food and wine based on body. And with this wine, the reason it can handle a steak is that it has a body. I said last week, the guy, if it were a person, it was, 250 or 300-pound guy. This one, I wouldn't say it's that big necessarily, but I would say, if it were a guy, he'd probably be 190. He would be a big person, but not huge. It's not so overwhelming, but it definitely, with meat, it can definitely stand for itself. And it would not be overwhelmed or in the wrong place in a steakhouse. Right. Flavor intensity, I would say is medium plus. Yeah, I would say medium plus. So now getting to what everyone wants to talk about, the secondary flavors and the tertiary stuff. So I think what was mentioned before is correct. The butterscotch, which is just a residue of that French oak. Honestly, I can see what you're saying. I haven't had butterscotch in a while, so like for me, it's almost like a caramel or caramel. I don't know. Everyone says it differently, but like I see what you're saying. Yeah, I do taste that. So I apologize for earlier for kind of shooting you down. Definitely getting that. And in terms of the other ones, the red, the skin really kind of, it really stands out. And so it kind of overwhelmed some of this other stuff. So the yeast, right? This wine obviously had yeast in it at some point, but I'm not getting any bread notes or biscuity notes because the red skin and the tannin make it so that it hides those molecules. And so it's not that it's not there, it's that it's just so well camouflaged. In terms of tertiary, so this is kind of what it's getting from bottle age. And so it's a 2019 cab. And so it's seen a couple of years in the bottle, but it tastes remarkably young. I'm a little skewed because I'm used to like really old, like overly tired wine. But this wine is not, I mean, it seems pretty youthful to me. But, some would say it maybe got some, I would say actually, no, it definitely has some bottle age. I mean, so some of it doesn't, it could be young because you can have bottle age notes from the outset, but there are definitely notes here. So we see leather, forest floor, earth, mushroom, game. I am definitely getting leather and forest floor. So forest floor, think of like the twigs, the broken down leaves. Think of autumn, just walking in a forest, taking a hike. Like I am getting that on the palate here. Obviously, when I'm hiking, I don't usually eat the leaves, but like if I were to, like, it probably tastes similar to this, maybe. I hope. So some of the other stuff we have, meaty, savory. I'm not getting so much meaty, but I am getting, the wet leaves. I'd call them dry leaves. I wouldn't call them wet leaves. Farmyard, yeah, a little bit, but no, I mean, socks and sweat, that you can smell in old cab. I'm not getting really sweaty sock, the smell of a gym. I mean, you do get it in wine. It's not the most desirable smell, which makes sense, but you do see it in really expensive wine, actually, and I'm not getting that. So the finish, I would have to find out. So granted, I have no crackers at Nick's place, but I would say it's not the longest finish for a cab. Cab finishes can be up to 45 seconds. This cab, you can taste. I don't want to give it away, but you can taste its price point. So it's not the longest finish for a cab, which is not a bad thing. It's not as if we were having a very complicated meal that we didn't want a very complicated wine for. This wine would do wonderfully. So now the fun part, we're going to find out how we stack next to the fools who write these reviews. Okay, dark fruit we got. That was the black currant that Emily said. Mocha. Okay, so this is going to the coffee, chocolate, vanilla notes. So this is what we were saying was butterscotch. So it's the same idea, the hints of vanilla. It's just kind of with red wine, we don't really use butterscotch. So again, going to like masculine and feminine, like butterscotch, it's kind of feminine. Like for like this like masculine wine, we would use a word like vanilla or like something that's a little like, I don't know, a little more something. Yeah, that sounds smart, but all right. Black cherry and red raspberry. So there were red fruit notes. I did not mention them. I was mistaken. We mentioned black cherry, and it's funny. I kind of use black cherry as like, it's kind of like it's a black fruit, but it's really related to red cherry, which is a red fruit. So by saying black cherry, I think we kind of did both, but I guess they were saying that there was also kind of this red fruit notes. And so yeah, definitely ripe fruit. These weren't cooked fruits. Lodi is known for kind of, this jammy, so this as a like very fruity, overly fruity wine. We didn't get that here. We got a better balance, as one of the French dudes said earlier, is more desirable. You don't want one thing to stand out. And so luckily with this wine, no one thing really stood out. Wilfred Wong, the guy from wine.com, who's trying to sell you wine, so he's probably going to say a very complimenting thing. He says that dried leaves, earthy notes, and forest floor. We mentioned that. I said, oh yeah, not wet leaves. See, so the leaves were not wet. They were definitely dry. and like twiggy. So he recommended a pasta with mushroom sauce. Interesting. And then, yeah, as the last one said, so 8 months of new oak barrels. They call it delightful, the wine. So I don't know if everyone was delighted, but hopefully a couple of us were. Now, in terms of pairing, please do not buy the Sutter Home wine. I'm just using their kind of diagram. So Cab can pair with Chicago style pizza, roast beef sandwiches, lasagna, blackened chicken. So the reason they don't say, regular chicken is that like regular chicken, it doesn't need something so heavy. So, but like a blackened chicken, something that is kind of like very flavorful, could use something with a bigger body, such as a Cab. Bacon wrapped sausages, definitely, I could see that. But like, I don't get why you would wrap bacon, which is pork, around another pork thing. Like, I've never heard of that, but apparently you can at Sutter Home. Then filet, so filet mignon. Yes, definitely a filet mignon. This wine is not as, I thought it was going to be a bigger Cab because it's from Lodi, so a very big place, jammy. But this wine actually could pair with a filet mignon. It doesn't require a T-bone or a kind of a more flavorful cut. The last thing it says, double chocolate cake. Do not do that. That is the worst pairing idea I've ever heard. That would be the most unflattering pairing you could ever give it. So like with the sweetness and the decadence of a chocolate cake, this wine is going to seem tannic. It's going to seem bitter. It's going to seem sour. It would seem awful. So never pair this with a chocolate cake. With chocolate cake, you can go with a ruby port. So in Portugal, they make this sweet wine, dessert wine called port. It is fantastic with chocolate-based desserts. And then with a non-chocolate dessert, we would go with the other Bordeaux wine, which we just learned about, called Sauterne, which is made from that fungus with that grape, hand-picked one by one, that one. Okay, going back to last week's pairing principle, local wine with local food. The rule kind of breaks down in the New World, in New Zealand, because like, what is like the New Zealand food? I don't really know. I guess lamb, but I wouldn't really pair lamb with the Sauvignon Blanc. I would probably go with a red, something more like the Cab, or I would really go with something from next week though, with lamb. But that's why you got to stick around for next week. I would say, a chicken parm maybe would have done okay. With, you could have gone pork, but I think the pairings we mentioned earlier were better. But traditionally, so in Bordeaux, what they eat is, game. So, an old Bordeaux can pair very well with, a gamier meat. And so that's what you're going to see. This is a very young version of a Bordeaux. And this is the California version, which, as the French voice said, is like, a little different. And it is. So some questions for next week. We finally got time. We're finished a little bit. So is it hard to find good value in France? These wines we drank, they're French grapes, but they're not from France. Why are they not from France? Why did we not drink French wine? Is it because French wine is overpriced? Is it because if we were going to spend $20 for a bottle of French wine, it'd be pretty shitty? I think it might be. Next question. Going back to the previous question, one more thing. Is there a place though in Europe that we can get wine that is a good value? Is there a place that we can get a good QPR quality price ratio? I think there might be. And so next week, we're going to see in Spain that there are kind of these unknown grapes, given these Spanish names that are not around the world as much. They're more local and endemic to Spain. They're going to be better values and they're going to be more interesting. And they're not going to be the generic Cabernet. Now, as I kind of meant going to the second question, will climate change make Bordeaux too hot for Bordeaux varietals? It's possible. What will we be drinking with our grandchildren? It probably will be something from a hotter region, such as Spain. And so please come next week to get a taste of what you'll be drinking in the future.